Your ears do not deceive you. You have just entered the Cryptid Creator Corner brought to you by your friends at Comic Book Yeti. So without further ado, let's get on to the interview.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Cryptid Creator Corner. I'm Byron O'Neill, your host for today's chat, and I'm joined today by a new guest on our show. He's an Eisner Winner, was a creative director at Marvel, has worked on many a comics property, including Star Wars, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Batman, Superman, the Earth X Trilogy, and recently is collaborating on a hybrid prose/graphic novel with Grammy Nominated EDM icon Steve Aoki. Jim Krueger, welcome to the show. How's things? How you doing?
Oh, it's good. I'm glad. I just started working on book 2, so all is good.
Good. Well, I just finished up reading all of book 1. Really, really enjoyed it. Saw that book 2 is coming, so excited to see that too. There's a lot to unpack with Hiroquest because it encompasses kind of so many different things, right? So it's Steve Aoki's 7th studio album. It's a trading card game. It's a graphic novel. A couple of nights ago, I listened to the album while cooking dinner, and after I finished up the book, I read a few reviews on the album and they were kind of somewhat mixed. I spent 15 years in the music business myself on the tech side of things. And the criticisms I think just hadn't bought into the concept, the journey that it takes you on. And there's some synchronicity across of that journey across all these different platforms. It flows through all these different genres, eras, like quick breakdown, starts with like 90s EDM beats from like Prodigy influenced stuff, moving into a Latin infused track with trumpets, like something with a Kylie Minogue feel, country pop, straight up country, a 30 Second to Mars anthem. So it's kind of all over the place. And it feels like it's basically this musical journey of what's influencing Steve musically or has been at the time. So I guess first of all, are you an EDM fan? Like when you got into this, or
You know what? I wasn't, but I've gone to a lot of Steve's shows, and I started what I was a fan of. So I already kind of knew it was I'm a giant fan of Peroff Stellar, the
okay,
Belgium electro jazz musician. So I was into that, and I had gone to those shows. And then when I first went to a show of Steve's, because I was working on Neon Future at the time, I was like, oh, I get it. But I mean, and this certainly shows up in my writing. I think I'm very like-minded to Steve in the sense that I'm constantly grabbing from other genres and trying to combine them to form like a new type of story or a new approach to storytelling.
well, I've kind of always thought of Steve as a collaborator, as a fan of his music. So, it's the first thing that pops to mind when I think about his totality of body of work. So, how did you two meet and sort of kick this whole thing off?
Well, it was really funny. I mean, years ago, a couple of years ago, I worked with Tom Bilyeu to help him launch, I guess, what would be considered Steve's first comic, Neon Future.
Okay.
And so that's how Steve and I became friends. That's how we started talking and, that kind of thing. And then every once in a while, I love to go down to Solana Beach, which is like, I want to say 20 minutes, 25 minutes north of San Diego.
Okay.
Um, and so I was there, and there's a little music place there, and they were advertising that Steve was going to come and perform there. And I was like, oh, all right. So I went down, um, went to the green room, said hi to Steve, and Steve was like, oh my gosh, I'm putting out this card game, and I needed the story. And I'm like, who am I going to get to write the story? And then Jim, you just walked in. So it was
There you
like
go.
that.
Okay.
And Steve has been a fan of my comics for a long time, and the way I approach things, and the way I kind of figure out how pieces fit together. And he's like, I just need you to step in and write this. And he's like, and then we start talking about it and talking about all the various different worlds that this story would cover and go to, and how it all needs to work together.
So I'm trying to get my bearings because we did live actually in San Diego for a year while my wife was getting her postdoc. Is Solano Beach, is that north of Encinitas a little bit?
I want to say it's west,
Oh, okay. Okay. Okay.
but it's still below, like, uh, I don't know, where's Legoland.
Okay. Yeah.
Like, it's not as far north as Legoland.
Okay. Yeah, it's in. Okay, I've got it now. All right.
And
Anyway,
it's this beautiful little town.
yeah, there are lots of little beautiful towns getting north of San Diego before you get to the army. It's, anyway, not about geography. Comics are a collaborative medium, and you've made your share of them. So, was there a difference in approach to kind of working with someone coming from another creative medium entirely?
Yeah, no.
Okay.
No, it really wasn't all that different at all. It was, well, it's I guess the difference would be this. When I've worked, with people like Alex Ross, or even smaller things like on smaller projects like Bill Sienkiewicz or stuff like that. We're all in our home offices or in this case, if I'm getting notes or Steve has a new idea, I may be getting a FaceTime call from Paraguay, and then the next day, you know, it's Canada, and then the next day it's Norway, and it's like, so many times it's in the back of a cab, or it's hey Jim, I got this idea, and blah 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 blah. Blah. You need to use this in. Oh, I was thinking about this moment from my childhood. I really want that emotional thing for a hero in the midst of this part. So there's that part.
Insane. Well, listen, to give people kind of a lay of the land, if you will, of what the graphic novel is about. We're following teen Hiro, which is spelled Hiro, but pronounced Hero, a genetically augmented human who is bouncing around the multiverse for 400 years into the future to save planet Earth from impending doom. He's looking for 10 rings from 10 separate worlds, and he's got a set of superpowers to help him out, courtesy of a group of doctors that augmented him. So you got flight and super strength and a sort of ESP or special insight from the third eye.
Right.
And as I mentioned, it's presented both with prose and in a comics format. And the prose details kind of what he's doing more present tense, and the comic bits provide more of a like an origin background as we kind of move through the book. I had no idea until I got the book in my hands about the prose element. I was thinking, it's full graphic novel, just assuming it was, like that. But why did you want to set it up in that way?
Um, I don't know if there's a single good answer to that other than it just seemed like the best way.
Okay.
The best way to set up everything. And, I mean, in so much of it, we're on a hero's journey with Hiro, which, by the way, Hiro, that Hiro, that's Steve's middle name.
Hmm.
And so, it just felt like it was a very personal, very perspective. Like we have Hiro's perspective through the entire thing. And it felt like um, getting into Hiro's mind and seeing the things he's commenting on and being there every bit of the way with him was the best way to tell the story. And in so many ways, I'm always trying to figure out what's the best way to tell a story.
Okay. Yeah, and we visit each of the 10 worlds looking for the rings of power and these kind of shorter narrative bits, right? You get short paragraph break, for few for short pages, and then a character visual that kind of helps establish an anchor, for that segment. And it to me, it read more akin to like a parable or kind of a sequential group of sort of fairy tales, than say a traditional novel. It took me a little bit to get into the format, but I quickly bought in and kind of got into the rhythm of this kind of creative iteration of storytelling. And it really is a rhythm, right? The comic interludes cap off the ends kind of like a musical stanza, and you get ready for that next beat drop, the next explanation bit. So this could be all me kind of reading more into the format than there is. But that's how it hit me anyway. So how did that structure emerge through that creative collaboration that you're doing? Because it
Yeah,
sounds
well,
like Steve is feeding you bits sort of over time in a way. Is that
yeah, no, I mean, there were bits like I wrote. Well, one, it's really one of the things we did is we made sure that each chapter in it was named after one of Steve's Hiroquest songs,
yeah, I noticed that.
and hidden within each of the chapters is a lyric or part of a lyric from that song.
Okay.
So
I'll have to go
them-
back and compare the two again.
thematically, yeah, I think they should have a contest who can find them first. You know,
Indeed. Sure.
um,
Yeah.
but that was part of it. And at all points, as I was in the midst of writing this and then rewriting it, working it through, it was so like it had to feel like Steve. It had to be like Steve. It had to touch on some of the things. It had to touch on things that were important. And I think that's one of the reasons I'm I've had some success at least being a collaborator because I really listen to the people I work with, and I wanted it to be like a spiritual fairy tale of life, you
Okay.
know, in all these different worlds. Like this conversation started at the beginning talking about Steve doing this type of music or this type of music and this
Yeah.
type of music. And so it's no surprise to me at all that this is a journey that goes to multiple different worlds, each of which have, completely different things going on.
Yeah. So so how did you go about kind of flushing out and doing the world building for that? Because as I'm going through this at first, I wanted more world building, right? Because I'm so used to either a novel format or a graphic novel, right? Um, so you get so much more fed a lot more information. I realized by Ring 2, I think that Hero's just he's never supposed to be anywhere for that long, and maybe that is painting a picture entirely of like Steve bouncing around everywhere all over the globe. Um, there's just enough to kind of paint the picture in your mind topographically of what Hero's up to. But it's a bit of a bare bones approach. Like I'm a visual artist, first and foremost, but I'm trying to work on my own script writing, especially in comics. So this kind of would scare the shit out of me to pare it down like this much, but my wife says I'm really wordy. So how did you find your footing, I guess, in that kind of writing style? I
Well,
really
first of
enjoyed
all,
it.
as someone who, some people have been like, wow, when Jim wrote Earth X, there he just wrote and wrote and wrote. It's nice to have at least one project out there that people are like, oh yeah, that's pretty pared down. Yeah, okay. So thanks for that first. And
Sure.
then part of that reason was it's a 50,000 word novel with some graphic novel elements in it, the manga sections, with a bunch of these kind of almost addendums to each chapter that have some images too to kind of give us a sense of the world. The idea is that what's going on in Hero is more important than what's going on in the world in every case. How these worlds are affecting Hero, how his journey from world to world to collect the ring from that world, how that's changing Hero is more important than the world
Okay.
he's visiting in every case. And so the choice wasn't to necessarily like those worlds are always there for us to go back to and explore, and the consequences, and I say that very cryptically because of I don't want to give away how the story ends, but the consequences of what happens in book one we begin to see in book two, of
Okay.
course, and we experience what happens when a ring is taken from one world and ends up on Hero's hands. What happens to that world, and that's all going to play out.
And we're not just bouncing around between, I guess, fun roles, witches, goblins, robot. It's all very topical, really, and relevant to a lot of social issues we're dealing with right now culturally, right? Did you kind of start out with a list? Okay, I need to touch on AI and climate change and like id gratification, fear of the other. Like there's
Yeah,
a
it
lot
wasn't.
in here.
Yeah, thanks. In fact, a lot of people have commented much how much depth it has compared to what they expected it to have.
Yeah.
And so I totally appreciate that. And it wasn't like there was a list of things to deal with. But it's kind of how I think. And so, that's why um on the AI world, I'm like, well, what about those robots that haven't achieved artificial intelligence? You know, and are they slaves to the AIs who have, which made me think about things like H.G. Wells and
Hmm.
the Morlocks and the Eloi. And it made me think about, what it means to serve in the world and what it means to not be served in the world. And so I just started thinking about those things. I know, there's lots of people on both sides of the spectrum of AI. And on that world, I wasn't particularly thinking, ooh, AI has got to be bad. Um, because I also allowed AI to love, to have the experience of love. It's actually a broken AI in that world that's really the problem. And yet, you know, it just felt right. And in a lot of cases, it wasn't like, ooh, let me do a fairy tale or let me do a morality tale. It was more like, um, hey, Steve, what if we showed the consequences of this?
Okay.
And like one of the things that came out, like there's a goblin world, and everyone was talking about goblin mode in the midst of COVID. And I
Yep.
was like, oh, that's cool. Okay. And then that made me think about how much shorter all of our attention spans are now. And I'm like, oh, so on that world, it would be a world where everything is not finished or
Hmm.
not completely leveled. It's a world where where everyone, these creatures, live by their whims. And then I was like, okay, so if Hiro comes to this world on a quest that he has to stay to and keep to, would he even find anyone to help him for long? Even if he could find someone to help him, how long would they be with him before they went off to do something else, like burn their neighbor's house down or eat someone? This
Yeah.
is a
Do it.
goblin world. I mean,
Yep.
it can't be all metaphor, but it was like that. And then I would
Yeah.
talk to Steve about it, and I would go through Steve's lyrics on the songs and say, what do this collection of songs that are going to be on this world, how do these songs fit into this, and all that kind of thing.
Yeah. I think the Grimbold world was actually the one that was my favorite, even though it's probably the most diabolical, I guess.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah. But it
But I
was.
but I love the guy with the eye patch, and I don't want to give away, but I love the eye patch reveal.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a really good. Was there a particular kind of world of the 10 that was more challenging, or you had a whole lot more fun with than any other?
Um, they all brought different struggles. I think when I got to the robot world, because I wanted to tie it into the AI world we visit in the kind of the first thing. I
Hmm.
think there was a little more challenge there because I had already said things about the robots and their relationship with the AI in that one.
Yeah.
Um, with the AI thing that was based on Steve's Love Brains creations. Like in so many of these cases, the creatures that show up here and the monsters that they were all created by Steve, and Steve's like, okay, figure this out. Do you
No
have,
pressure.
oh, no, it was in the fun, because then, and the way I collaborate is, I really just talk it out with people.
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, what if we did this? What if we did this? Do you like this? Like he and I just figured out the end of book 2 the other day, and you know, there was this idea Steve was bringing into it, and that was a challenge. I think if I could, if I think I really loved the fairy world,
Okay.
especially with the queen princess at the end, like that whole back and forth, and the terrible conclusion that comes from that. I just loved it so much.
Yeah. I think the big thing for me, coming in with all these different worlds and trying to establish that thread, and the thing that was beautiful, and I think you did really, really well, was it, starting with the AI and humanizing it, because I did not anticipate that. We tend to think of AI functioning in this very robotic manner, right? And that was such a great buy-in to kind of set a tone for Hero, and then kind of his own personal development throughout the rest of the stories. So
Well,
really enjoyed that.
thank you so much. In fact, Jacob, who's this awesome guy who works with Steve's team, and that's his favorite. That's his favorite world. Like he's
Okay.
just like, I love that world, and I so appreciate you liking the Grembold world so much. I really like the Witch and Wizards world because I felt like I came up with a new way to do it.
It's tough. Yeah, it's a tough
You
genre.
know, I was really happy with everyone being really polite and words being power.
All right, let's take a quick break. Hey, comics fam. Indie comic book publisher Band of Bars just got a level up and announced it is now a cooperative. This heralds a new era for them, including a partnership with Dauntless Stories. And they added several new members to the ownership group. Marcus Jimenez is now Chief Operating Officer, Brent Fisher takes on the role of Chief Diversity Officer, and Joey Galvez is introduced as Head of Kickstarter Ops and Social Media Manager, which is sure to increase their capabilities overall as a publisher. And it further promotes their mission statement of advancing representation, inclusion, and diversity in the medium. They also established a new board of directors to help chart the new path of their journey. With new projects in the works like Alas Goodbye dropping in June, Unbroken soon launching on Kickstarter, and Pawn coming up with Dauntless, stay tuned to this space for more exciting news from the growing Bards family. Let's get back to the show.
There's a really personal element in this for all of you. Hiro and his family are fleeing a natural disaster, and there are two important state landmarks that come up: Florida and Wisconsin. You grew up in Wisconsin, right?
Yeah.
And unless the internet is completely failing me here, you had a bit of a transformative trip to Magic Kingdom as a child that included a hurricane, no less.
I did. Amazing. My parents got on a train from Wisconsin, went down to Chicago. Incidentally, what was so interesting on that trip to Chicago, that train trip to Chicago, is my dad bought me and my brother he bought me a Superman comic, my brother a Batman comic, and I was
Okay.
so jealous of my brother getting the Batman comic, and so almost resentful and upset about the Superman comic. But I didn't even know that journey was going to turn me into the biggest Superman fan.
Okay.
Like, I have this giant Superman story. I so hope I get to tell one day. So hope it's on my like I don't have bucket lists of things I want to go visit or anything like that. I have bucket lists of stories I still need to write.
So is this based on jealousy then?
No, not at all. The Superman
Oh, okay.
thing. Anyhow, so the train and I mean, this was a time when travel by train was pretty reasonable, at least, but we were going down, so we had our own compartment, sleeping compartment. Like, it was really, really nice and beautiful. So we get there, and I think we're like still a day away when we find out that Florida's been hit by a hurricane. And in the midst of the hurricane, um, my mom's saying things similar to, well, it's Disney World. There have to be things we can do inside, you know. And my dad saying, well, when I was in the military here, the weather can change just like that. Let's not fear. But there we are, in front of Disney World, and we're all in our yellow rain ponchos and that kind of thing. And
Yeah.
Disney World's slightly different than Disneyland in the sense that there's a longer. The train goes around, and there's a longer tunnel you have to go in because they have all their lockers inside underneath the tunnel. But in the time of going through that into that tunnel, and the tunnel would come out into, you're in the Magic Kingdom, you're on Main Street, you can see the castle, all that stuff. In the midst of entering and coming out on the other side, the hurricane broke, and it was like entered from darkness and came out into light. And there you had all the clouds shifting with the sun shining through, and the rays of the sun cascading off the puddles that were already beginning to disappear on the ground, and
Yeah.
reflections of the castle and the streets and balloons, in the puddles and stuff like that. And it was the most miraculous thing as a 6-year-old to face. I looked at my dad, and he said, now you know why they call it the Magic Kingdom.
There you go.
And that in itself fucked me up forever. The rest of my life, I'm tortured by that. And that's why even so many of my stories begin in darkness and move towards light,
Okay.
even though Hiroquest might not be that. Yeah,
I guess we'll see.
who
We'll
knows?
have to. Right. Exactly. So, well, how much of this is the life of Jim then? Kind of aside from bouncing around the metaverse, grabbing magic rings to save the planet. Although I don't know you well, maybe. Yeah.
Oh, no, no. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of me in it. There aren't any Jim Krueger Easter eggs except for maybe Wisconsin.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
and if I remember correctly, I think Steve was born in Miami.
Yeah.
So that's a Florida thing. Um, but what I usually do on stories is I try to figure out what's something very personal to me that everyone can relate to.
Yeah.
And so, there's a lot in this story that the audience is asked to take on faith. And there's a lot in this, and there's a lot in my life that I've taken on faith, and I haven't always been right. And, we live in a world right now where, who knows which politician is telling the truth? Who knows if any politician is telling the truth? Hear things about big pharma, hear things about pollution and business. And there's a lot that all of us just assume is okay, only to discover that maybe it's not.
And that's really interesting to put Hiro. Well, he's a teen, right? I have a
Yeah,
teenager myself, and yeah, it's applicable to all of us going through that experience. What is real? What is the truth? What are we being fed? That's reality.
yeah.
Now. Um, okay, very interesting. Yeah. Well, I won't give anything, but the only Easter egg that I caught, this is kind of my personal favorite. And it won't give anything away, but there's a source code for each of the 10 rings. And
Right.
so the last one, the cumulative power is unlocked with dim mock, right?
Yeah.
For people who don't know what that is, right? It's a secret pressure point technique in martial arts said to incapacitate or potentially even cause death to an opponent. But it's also Steve's record label. So yeah,
Yep. Yep.
yeah.
Yep. Nope. And that was there from the beginning. Steve was like, okay, you know what? This has to be one of those source code call outs that brings on all the power.
Well, let's talk about inspirations for a minute, because structurally, there's a lot of Joseph Campbell, a hero with 1,000 faces, the 12 stages of the hero's journey. Even
Yeah.
if we're sort of revisiting that multiple times, sort of in the act two of that structure of the monument. So, how much of that blueprint were you consciously using in HeroQuest?
I don't know. I don't know if I ever consciously use anything.
Okay.
I kind of just enter into it and think structure and think what's the coolest thing I could possibly do in this world, in this story. I have this Peter Pan project, which is another one of the bucket list things, which will be like three little novellas. And that started with this great, great moment of Captain Hook doing something terrible and awesome and a piece of dialogue that would go with it that just made me go, oh, now I have to write this project.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, because my background was advertising before I got the chance to be writing and that kind of thing, because of that, I, a lot of times it'll be a line that comes to me in the midst of all the stories, you know, um, that I'm like, oh, that's the moment of dialogue that everything has to serve. Like when I teach writing courses or I teach online things and stuff like that, I always talk about how when you approach a story, you have to be really fluid. You have to let it go in slightly different directions. You have to be open to, you know, killing your babies, which is that phrase, that they always use for writers. And, you know, I I once had to apply this this notion of technique, of writing technique at a church where they wanted me to talk about people telling their own faith journey stories.
Okay.
And I think I lost my audience when I said, I've killed more babies than Herod.
That'll do it. Yeah. Yeah.
That was the end.
Okay. Yeah.
But it was fun. But all that is to say, I'm like, when you approach a story, there has to be that thing that you love so much about the story you're about to tell that no matter what, you don't get rid of that thing, because that's the reason you're telling the story. And so, a lot of times a writer will say, like, I just like to sit down and start writing and see where it goes. And I'm like, that never works for me. Like, I always have to have at least some sort of plan, because that's what I'm building towards. Or if the thing I'm building towards isn't the end, that's the thing that's going to pivot the story to the correct conclusion or something like that.
Well, what about this unique project sucked you in? What was that thing that made you wanted to commit when you heard about it?
I can't answer that.
Okay, fair enough.
Only because it's the end.
Okay.
And in so many ways, if you look back at the book, and hopefully there's enough guts there and enough things there that people will want to read it again after the first time. But you can see in the conclusion that I was hinting at it from the very beginning.
Yeah.
Just
Well,
in some of the things that he says and Hiro says, and some of the things he's been wondering, and some of the ways he doubts himself or pushes himself forward, because if he doesn't do this, his parents are dead, all those sorts of things.
yeah, there's a really interesting element I want to ask questions about, but I don't want to give anything away about the double helix thing. So we'll save that. That's a tease for people. But there is development, clearly, I guess, beyond this book that is super fascinating to me. But again, we don't want to give it away for folks. So is there, after working in so many different kinds of entertainment mediums, books, video games, comics, is there a secret sauce to writing across all these multiple genres, or is it just to keep that germ first and foremost?
Well, it's definitely keeping the germ. But then the other thing is, I feel like you really have to respect and enjoy um, all these different versions of storytelling, and see them as like really unique versions of unique ways of telling a story, and respect, even like people talk about, well, there are certain rules for a genre, and if you don't respect those rules for the genre, even if you're going to push them or bend them, it's going to not be in that genre anymore. And then it'll kind of be rejected as a form of that genre. So that kind of even applies to video games or film or TV or books or anything. You really have to, like, if you're going to be a writer, you really, in all these different areas, you really have to respect and see where each way of telling a story can excel.
Yeah, I mean, it applies across all creative mediums. As a visual artist, you have to know the rules in order to properly break the rules.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
technically, it's not even like you break the rules. It's like, you break, it's more like there's the illusion of breaking the rules, but you're not actually breaking.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what else you got cooking right now? Obviously, we've got book 2.
Yeah, book 2 is going to take up my next 3-4 months, and then there's always like 6 months after that, for the art to come in, for extra cards to be written, for all that sort of thing. Because I wrote a lot of cards for this first book. But in addition to that, it's a big year, and there's some things I can talk about and some things I can't. But there's a certain project that I've been working on for years, and I'm so excited that book 1 comes out at the end of this year, and then book 2 comes out a year later. But it's called "Oh Haunted Night," and it's basically a holiday advent calendar, or it's an advent calendar of holiday horror. So the idea is that everyone can read a new haunted holiday short story from December 1st to December 25th. And it's definitely Christmassy in all the ways it can be, even though that's not the only holiday it deals with. In some cases, the stories are really sweet and nice, and in other ways, they're not. Like Poison Cookies, while maybe being the funniest story in there, is also maybe one of the most terrible as far as consequences go for others. You know, but then there's a story about how Santa got his wife from a family of evil coal miners, you know,
Okay.
that
I'm
begins
not.
with the words, sometimes monsters come in human form, and then it goes on from there. Or there's a prequel to A Christmas Carol in there. I think one of my favorite stories in it is this thing called Evil Elf, in which a elf is he's just pissed off about the whole Christmas thing and working on toys, and he knows that Santa's probably got some sort of special food that keeps all the elves small when they could grow larger, and the songs he hates, all of it. And so he decides he's going to steal Santa's naughty list, and he's going to steal all the best of toys and deliver them to all the naughty kids, and that will propel evil around the world. And then the story goes on from there.
So are you working with individual artists on each of these?
No, no, no. So
Okay.
this is another prose book, but
Oh, okay. Okay.
one of the guys that I've been working with almost my entire career is this artist named John K. Schneider,
Okay.
the third, and John is, I don't know, maybe he's best known for the story arc he did in John Ostrander's Suicide Squad, which of course led to our Suicide Squad movies and that kind of thing. But John's been with me since like the days of Foot Soldiers, when he did some covers for Foot Soldiers. And so he's doing the two covers for book one and book two, and those will fit together into one whole like haunted holiday house image. And he's also doing a small piece of art for each of the chapters, and hopefully uh, that full piece and those pieces and that small art will be turned into its own advent calendar. Because I grew up with that. My mom
Okay.
would tape them to the window, and every morning we'd have to go and open. That was before they put chocolate in them, when they were old German, things like that. So that's coming out. And I should probably also mention that at some point this year, there will be a Kickstarter for a Foot Soldiers omnibus coming out, which will include all kinds of new stories as well as all the ones that people may or may not know.
Nice. Okay. Very cool. Yeah. I want to circle to the trading card game too. Like that was the first time you'd ever worked on trading cards. The hero card. There's like 66 trading cards, kind of Pokemon sort of style.
Yeah, yeah.
So you're doing more of those too coming up.
I expect so. I expect
Okay.
so.
Okay.
I never want to. I would never want to, step in for sureness. But I think
Yeah.
everyone. What's great and what's awesome is I think Steve and his team are really glad and happy with what I've been able to bring to this. So that's really cool. You hope people like it, but then you also hope that the people you're working with like it.
Oh yeah. Always. I mean, it struck me as this just amazingly unique, collaborative, cross medium platform. I mean, it's ambitious. I can't say I've seen anything quite like it before.
That's cool.
Yeah, yeah. Well, where can people find you online?
Probably best on my Instagram, which is I'm Jim Krueger, just the letter I, the letter M, and then GIMKRUER. And that's where I announce new things and promote things and that kind of thing. One of these days, I'll get around to a website again, and I had one for a long time, but you know, right now Instagram is fine.
Yeah.
And that's the place to find me.
Okay. Yeah. The websites are a lot to keep up with. You got to update them. Everybody expects a newsletter too. So yeah.
Yeah.
nature of the beast, right? Can't write because you have to keep up with social media. But
Yeah.
well, Hiroquest is out in stores now. I'll be honest, it was not at all what I expected when I decided I wanted to cover it, but I found it to be like, as I said, this incredibly bold and inventive approach to different modes of storytelling through both auditory and visual means. And I love it when people take risks and swing for the fences. It's a whole lot of fun. Having spent a decade and a half on the road myself, it was kind of this refreshing, reflective approach from you both that has this engaging fabric that all these seemingly disparate elements that you can take together and mash them in this atypical jaunt through the monomyth. So I really, really dug it. It was a lot of fun. Make sure to snag yourself a copy. Jim, thanks so much for hanging out with me today on the show. Yeah, hope we do it again sometime. Sounds like you got some great stuff coming up.
Yeah, please. I'd love that. This was a blast.
Okay, awesome. Well, this is Byron O'Neill, and on behalf of all of us at Comic Book Yeti, thanks for listening to the Cryptic Creator Corner, and we'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.
This is Byron O'Neill, one of your hosts of the Cryptic Creator Corner, brought to you by Comic Book Yeti. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of our podcast. Please rate, review, subscribe, all that good stuff. It lets us know how we are doing, and more importantly, how we can improve. Thanks for listening.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Cryptid Creator Corner, maybe you would enjoy our sister podcast, Into the Comics Cave. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.